Hello, welcome. I'm Masood Raja, and today I'll briefly talk about Marx's concepts of formal and real subsumption of labor and its application to certain specific aspects of Pakistani economy, but also other developing economies. Now, these two concepts, the formal subsumption of labor and real subsumption of labor, were discussed in a document which was entitled The Results of the Immediate Process of Production by Marx somewhere in 1863, and then they are included as an appendix in the Capital Volume 1 produced by Penguin. Now, I'm not going to go into the intricacies and its rereadings by some of the contemporary critics. I'm just working with a limited definition of the concept and then how does it apply to Pakistani feudal system. So the definition of formal and real subsumption of labor that you see in front of you on the screen was actually Michael Hart and Antonio Negri's explanation of these concepts in an article that they published in a special issue of CCC, and I'll post a link to that in the description. And the way they describe these two competing concepts is formal subsumptions means that wage labor relations are imposed on particular forms of labor without transforming the mode of production. Real subsumption, in contrast, means a qualitative change of the mode of production so that more radical organizational and technological changes take place. So, keeping in mind this brief explanation of formal and real subsumption of labor, I am not actually going into Michael Hart and Antonio Negri's argument. I am taking these words, right, and then applying it to the situation in Pakistan, which is a capitalistic economy. And my argument is that most of the rural economy in Pakistan, especially in Sindh or wherever large land holdings exist, while capital has reached there, the relations of production in the rural agricultural heart of Pakistan are still under formal subsumption of labor and have not transitioned into the real subsumption of labor. And here is the reason. If you look at Sindh and parts of southern Punjab, majority of the sharecroppers or peasant farmers, whom we call muzaras or haris in Sindh, actually have not been transitioned into wage labor, right? So they either work as tenant farmers in exchange for right to live on the land and maybe extract some meager livelihood out of it, or if they are lucky, maybe they can rent the land from the landlords. But beyond that, there is no exchange of money going on, that you will work for me for 15 hours and I'll pay you this much. Now that keeps intact the social relations in which one large landholder not only owns a lot of agricultural land, but actually also owns the labor of people who live on it, right? And that is the ideal definition of the feudal system of production. Now, one expectation of capitalism was that when it actually subsumes a larger economy under itself, it will disrupt that mode of production. It will destroy the feudal system and replace it with the wage economy in which the workers then become a constituency, become a proletariat, and eventually become the engine for revolution and change. But in countries like Pakistan and even India, where workers, even when they move from the villages and enter the formal economy, are still controlled and constrained by the rural mode of production, which is the formal subsumption of labor. Their freedoms or their power to act within the capitalist economy is still determined by that. How? So if you look at the Haris or the Muzaras, right? First of all, they live on the land, they till it, they produce crops and everything which the landholder gets, maybe gives them a share, but there is no chance in that of either owning the land or upward mobility, right? And most of the times there is no exchange of cash, so that keeps those people entrapped in that situation generation by generation. It's even made worse by another form of capital where they can borrow money against their labor, right, from their landlord. And sometimes the money is being borrowed not just against their own labor, but the labor of their children. So that then creates a slave-like situation for people who are already working for a feudal lord or whosoever. But those who come to the cities and find a job still are governed and controlled by the power of the same feudal lord because their families are back there, right? And if these people become too independent, become too politically active, they can always be threatened, they can always be squeezed and harmed and told that if you do this, we will do this to your family, right? So that kind of emotional and political blackmail still exists. So here we are in the 21st century, right, where an economy like Pakistan, so many of its people, especially workers, are still caught in the pulls and pressures of a mode of production that a lot of people think is gone and it does not exist, right? If you want to see an example of it in fiction, let's say from the Indian context, right, the Adinga's novel The White Tiger is a great example of it, right? Why is that a great example? Because we know the main character, Balram Halwai, right? He is from a village, and when he takes care of his master and runs with the money, he makes a choice. And the choice is that because of that act, because of defying his masters for whom he worked as a driver, the retaliation will be against his family in the village and they will be wiped out. And that's exactly what happens, and only he and one of his nephews survive. So these are the consequences of formal subsumption of labor within the capitalistic project, but not moving it into real subsumption where the mode of production changes and where the workers themselves become a constituency and develop a new political social identity, right? And these are some of the things to keep in mind. And now keep in mind that this feudal system, which is pretty strong still in Pakistan, right? None of the dictators have been able to disrupt it. There is no land reform in any political party's agenda. I mean, some of the major politicians in Pakistan come from that class. The irony of it, of course, is Pakistan People's Party, which is workers' party, but it's run by, two of the biggest landholders in Sindh, right? But no, other political parties, including PTI or anyone, even Jamaat-e-Islami, have no solution for that. I mean, they would tell you that the religion permits people to hold as much property as they want, right? So I thought that's important to understand that the labor, especially rural labor, is still caught in a pre-capitalistic mode of production where their bodies and its labor is owned by their masters. And that even when they move into the cities, right, their actions are still governed by the old feudal mode of production, right? And without altering that mode of production, these workers will not move into the real capital where, of course, they will still be probably exploited, but where they can start thinking as individual owners of their own labor, right, which they sell to the capitalists, but also build solidarities with other sellers of labor and hence change the system. So these are some of the things to think about. Let me know what you think. It's a very simplistic explanation of formal and real subsumption of labor, but I thought if I just picked like a small nugget of it, explain it a little, and apply it to a practical situation in Pakistan, my native country, maybe it can help you understand the significance of these terms in Marx and how they even apply today. Now, I do recommend that you read Michael Hart and Antonio Negri's essay, because that argues that the entire world, right, is part of that real subsumption of labor by capital, and that would be yet another interesting read. Thank you so much. See you next time, and until then, peace and love.